A man disappears into a city for decades. He doesn't hide in the woods or run across borders. He hides in plain sight, under fluorescent lights, in meetings, in church ordinary life. And when he finally comes back to the spotlight, it isn't the police who pull him in. It's his own need to be seen. He didn't just want to get away with it. He wanted credit. He wanted you to know his name. A case of serial murder, stalking behavior, and how one mistake collapsed a mask that held for years. BTK, bind, torture, kill. That's not a name the public gave him. It was all him. Because this wasn't just about violence, it was about control. Not only over victims, but over perception, over fear, over his story. And in BTK's mind, he was the author. Wichita, Kansas. 1974. A family is attacked in their home. 4 people are killed: Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, and their 2 children, Josephine and Joseph. The city is shaken. Investigators are forced into a nightmare scenario. A killer who appears organized, calm, and prepared. In the years that follow, more attacks occur. The details are horrific, and we're not here to sensationalize them. What matters for understanding BTK is the pattern he builds. He targets, he plans, he watches, he studies routines, he looks for openings. He blends into the background until he decides he's ready. And early on, he shows investigators something they learn to watch for: a desire to communicate, a desire to be seen, without being seen. In the mid to late 1970s, Wichita changes. People change routines. They lock doors earlier. They check windows twice. They start noticing strangers, and then suspecting everyone. Because BTK doesn't operate in abandoned places. He operates where life looks normal. That normality is the camouflage. And what makes it worse is that he doesn't look like someone spiraling out of control. He looks like someone building a private world, a world where he controls the script, where he decides who becomes afraid, where he decides who gets to feel safe. BTK doesn't only commit crimes, he performs, he taunts, he writes, he leaves proof. Not because he has to, because he wants to. He wants investigators to know the crimes belong to him. He wants the media to say his name. He wants the city to feel that he can reach anyone, anywhere. There's a difference between a killer who hides to avoid detection and a killer who craves an audience. The second type is dangerous in a different way, because the need for attention doesn't fade. It escalates. BTK's audience was the public. His stage was the media. Newspapers, specifically. Letters begin arriving in Wichita. Some claim responsibility. Some describe details that weren't public. Some contain threats. Some carry a casual tone that makes them feel even colder. Because the message isn't remorse. The message is control. I did this. I can do it again. And you will talk about me. At one point, he begins using the name BTK. He's branding himself. That's the point. He isn't just committing violence. He's trying to build a legend. And here's what's easy to miss. A lot of criminals want to avoid detection. They want silence. BTK wants attention, but only on his terms. He wants fear in the city. He wants pressure on the police. And he wants the spotlight to land on his name. But he also wants to keep living his other life. The normal life. The one where nobody looks twice. Investigators work the case with what they have: crime scenes, witness statements, behavioral patterns, physical evidence, limited by the technology of the time. Years pass. The case surges forward, then falls back. No suspect, no arrest, no closure. And then something changes. BTK stops. No confirmed murders, no letters, no taunts. To the public, it looks like he disappeared, died, moved, or got locked up for something else. But to investigators, silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means the person is still there, watching, waiting, living life like nothing happened. This is where BTK becomes more than a crime story. It becomes a story about masks. Because when BTK is finally identified, what shocks many people isn't just that he existed. It's how ordinary he appeared. A job, a routine, a family, a public identity, a life with room for community involvement and normal social roles. A life where people could describe him as dependable. That ordinary surface is part of the horror. It means the disguise isn't the darkness. The disguise is normal. For years, the case sits in the background, a cold case file, quiet, unresolved, still open. And then, decades after it began, BTK returns. Not because police found him, because he wants the attention back. He starts communicating again, forcing himself into the public conversation. He wants the city to remember. He wants investigators to chase. He wants the media to report. And he doesn't just send messages. He sends tests. He tries to feel out the system. He wants to know what law enforcement can do now, compared to what they could do then. This is where his arrogance becomes a liability. Because he's still thinking like it's the past. But the world has changed. Crime solving has changed with it. Digital footprints exist now. Metadata exists now. And paper trails don't end at paper anymore. If you want attention badly enough, you eventually leave something behind. BTK makes contact and tries to control the conversation. He asks questions. He sets little rules. He tries to steer investigators the way a director steers a scene. And he makes a critical mistake. He assumes the police will play fair. He assumes that if he asks a question and gets an answer, it's a promise. But the system doesn't run on promises. It runs on evidence. He asks a question that becomes the beginning of the end. Can a floppy disk be traced? If he saves his message on a disk and sends it, can investigators find him? Police respond in a way that encourages him. A public message that signals it's safe. And BTK believes it. That moment matters, because it reveals the truth behind the mask. For all the planning, for all the cruelty, for all the control, he still wants validation. He wants the game to continue. So he sends a floppy disk. Investigators analyze it, and inside that disk is information BTK didn't realize he was providing. Not a confession in words, a trail, a digital fingerprint, the kind of evidence the modern world creates automatically. The disk is linked to a computer, the computer is linked to a user, and the user is linked to a name, Dennis, and then Dennis Rader. The mask starts to crack. From here, investigators move carefully, because in a case like this, you don't move fast. You move precisely. They corroborate the metadata. They cross-check timelines. They build a profile that matches a real person living in the area. And they watch. The goal isn't a dramatic confrontation. The goal is a case that holds up in court, because this isn't about winning a chase. It's about proving the truth. Law enforcement begins surveillance. They look at where he works, where he goes, how he moves through ordinary life, and they begin connecting the dots. A man with a public reputation, a man with access to normal spaces, a man who can blend in. And then, the final step: confirmation. Modern forensics gives investigators something they didn't have decades earlier: DNA. In the BTK case, investigators obtain a DNA sample through lawful process and compare it to evidence preserved from earlier crime scenes. And it matches. The case stops being a theory. It becomes a fact. February 2005. Dennis Rader is arrested. Later, he pleads guilty to multiple murders and is sentenced to multiple life terms in prison. The mask collapses in public. The city that lived with uncertainty for decades finally gets an answer. But the answer doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't return what was taken. It doesn't erase years of fear. Closure is a word that sounds clean. Real life rarely is. So when we talk about BTK, it's easy to focus on the letters, the arrogance, the floppy disk. But the center of this story is not the killer's ego. It's the victims. It's the families. It's the people who lived in a city where normal life felt unsafe for years. And it's the lesson cases like this keep teaching. Someone can look ordinary. Someone can sound ordinary. And still be capable of extraordinary harm. That's not paranoia. That's reality. If you're watching BlackTag, you already know what we do here. We follow the verified timeline. We separate myth from record. We don't glorify, and we keep the focus where it belongs. If you want the next file, subscribe. And if you've got a case you want covered, drop it in the comments. BlackTag. End file.